G'day everyone and welcome to another edition of the Weekend Wrap brought to you by CrowCast, of course. Pretty good effort by the boys on the weekend against the reigning premiers. Ultimately not good enough to get us over the line, but plenty to like about it and plenty to talk about. So without further ado, let's crack straight in, shall we? Good evening and welcome this Sunday, the 3rd of July, for another episode of the Weekend Wrap. And what the hell is going on there? Why is that coming up black? We'll just do that. There we go. And joining me today, after a little hiatus, is Macca's Haig. Oh, Macca, how you going? How you going, Knackers?
Knackers, just as bad as that when the Sandy Roberts was introducing Mrs. Cock, Mrs. Dick.
Yeah, that's right. Oh dear. Never mind. You'll have to, people listening tonight will have to excuse the odd brain fade from me because I'm just recovering from a little bout of illness which set me back a little bit. So hopefully I'll remain on deck for the duration, but it won't be a 2-hour love-in, that's for sure, Macca, tonight, because I don't think I've got 2 hours in me.
Jeez, I'm only just warming up, mate.
Pardon me. All right, well, look, let's not waste any time, mate. Why don't we get... see, I haven't even got the bloody scores up. What's going on here? Just let me do that. How you been travelling anyway, mate? Been going all right?
Yep. As you know, and just for the listeners out there, I've been diagnosed. I've got a cancer in my head, which I've had removed, the tumour.
Yeah.
But it's one in a million. And it's also
just
something
like you, mate.
Metastasized. So my head gets radiotherapy every day of the week, and I've had 17 of them. I've got 13 to go. So I intend to beat it. So
of course you do, and you will.
Not many people do, but I'm going to.
No, you will, mate. If anyone can do that, you can. No doubt about it. And you've got the thousands upon thousands of CrowCast listeners behind you as well, mate. No doubt.
Yeah, they're a good mob out there.
Some of them are all right. Speaking of which, and not to be too morbid, but you would have played a bit with and against Neil Kerley, I would have thought, Matt?
Yes, I actually, he was a little bit too strong for me.
Yeah. What were your impressions of him as a bloke?
Oh, look, he's a great bloke. He was really a man's man. Just no kidding around. If he didn't like what you were doing, he didn't just say, "I don't like what you're doing." There was a few adjectives around him, and done very, very forcefully as well. But by the same token, he was a very, very good man if you're doing things right.
Yeah. Now, was he at West Torrens 1 year?
Yeah. Yes, he was. Yeah, he was. He was down there, and I still remember the pre-season training that players, we had to jump over there were two petrol cans, I suppose those big ones, 44-gallon drums. Two.
Yeah.
And they had a wooden bar across it, and your players had to jump over it, and most of the players could only do it 4 times.
Yeah.
And I can remember Kerley saying, "You weak mob of pissweak mob," etc. And again, the guy's nearly 50.
Yeah.
And I think he jumped 21 times in succession.
Unbelievable.
You could see him in pain, but he would just do it.
Just keep doing it. Yeah.
Now you know how weak you are.
Well, I never met a person who played with or for him that wasn't inspired by him. I mean, for him to be able to get a basket case like the Bays were at the time up and to a flag was no mean feat. I mean, that was a party club until he got there, and he straightened him out pretty quick. And it's such a shame in many respects that I think the Victorian media have done as well as they're probably equipped to do in terms of honouring him over the course of the weekend. But when you compare how they honoured EJ compared to Neil Kerley, it's chalk and cheese. And to be quite frank, Neil Kerley was every bit the player, every bit the personality, and every bit the influence on his state as EJ was. And I must admit, I've been a little bit underwhelmed by the coverage this weekend of Neil Kerley, just because I think it's touched around the edges, but it hasn't really highlighted just how much of an influence the man was on South Australian football. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, and it boils down to the fact that the AFL is still really the VFL, and the SANFL, strong as it was looked at as a second-rate competition by the Victorians, even if we did beat them in state of origins. I agree with everything you said about Curls. He was every bit as good as Whitten, no doubt about it. And I'll say this: I don't know what Whitten was like to other men or people, but Kerley, I reckon he would have shaped many a guy who would have gone off the rails. He shaped their life in the right direction.
Yeah, and I was shocked. And I must admit, I went back and watched the open mic interview we did with Sheehan about 8 years ago, I reckon. And I was shocked to be reminded that he wasn't an inaugural inductee into the Australian Football Hall of Fame. I just couldn't believe that. He wasn't in the first tranche of inductees into the Australian Football Hall of Fame. I mean, that just boggles my mind. It really does.
Well, never be surprised at the VFL bias and the SANFL neglect theme. It's just there.
Yeah, it's a shame. And look, I don't want to make too big a deal of it. I actually thought even Adelaide's tribute to Neil at the beginning of the Melbourne game was a little bit underwhelming, considering the impact that he had on the formation of our footy club. Victorians became very aware of Neil when he started doing his boundary riding and all the rest of it. We'd known Neil for 30 years by that stage, and it's probably fair to say that Neil, along with a couple of others, were integral in the Crows even existing, and I just felt it was a little bit underwhelming.
Well, everything you said is true about he was one of the driving forces for the Adelaide Crows to exist. But having said that, I actually liked what they did. It was underdone, and I think I liked it for that particular reason, because that way it seemed very sincere and genuine rather than gushy and overwhelming. So
that's true.
I just thought it was very direct, and I liked it like that.
Yeah, okay. Fantastic that they're going to have a state funeral for him. I'd imagine it's going to be extremely well attended, and so it should. And it's, just a shame that he went out on those terms, but he will be fondly remembered. Anyway, Mac, speaking of remembering things, why don't we try and remember this week's result, shall we? How's that for a segue? That was pretty good, I thought. All right.
Well done.
Not bad. All right, we started off with the Lions reasserting themselves by 41 points over Western Bulldogs, 16-12-108 to 9-13-67. The Lions, with Zorko going down early, were still far too strong for the Pups.
Well, they had their ass kicked last week by 10 goals by Melbourne, but they bounced back very well. And what I highlight with the Dogs is they got a good middle, they got Norton up forward, and there's not much else.
Yeah, they're one short up forward, I think. The defence is serviceable, but they didn't really have the timber to combat the Lions. And I was a bit disappointed with their midfield. I felt like the Lions really were able to brush them off a bit, and given Zorko's going down early, I thought the Lions might have been able to get them in the midfield, but the Dogs could have got them in the midfield, but the Lions really held strong there.
Well, Neil did well, but I think Beveridge, he's not as good a coach as he thinks he is. He had Bontempelli in the middle most of the game, and early in the season when the Dogs were going very well, he used to have Bontempelli up forward because he's got enough good midfielders in McRae, Dunkley, Treloar, etc. And what he was doing, he actually really wasted McRae in the process because McRae was either not on the ground or sometimes in the middle, sometimes on a wing or sometimes on a half-forward flank, and Bontempelli was still taking most of the middle. And by doing that, he robbed himself of a forward. So, no, Beveridge is not as smart as he thinks he is.
I agree with you, Mac. I think sometimes he gets a bit too cute. St Kilda bouncing back after a shocking loss to Sydney the week before, getting up by 15 points. Carlton would be terribly disappointed with that. 10-18-78 Carlton to the Saints 14-9-93.
Yeah, interesting thing there was the fact that if you look, one would have thought before the game the danger in the game for St Kilda was up at full forward McKay and Curnow.
Curnow, yeah.
And they scored 3 between them. If you go down the other end, the tallest for St Kilda kicked 9.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a turnaround there. And Sinclair played one of the best defence games I've ever seen anybody play in terms of 37 possessions, and he finding a body most of the time and really setting up their play. And last week he was. They even put a tagger on him as a back pocket, and they kept him down. And accordingly, the Saints went down. But you let Sinclair off the leash, and you're in trouble.
Very true. Speaking of surprising wins, and Sydney now in a bit of strife at the bottom end of the 8. Essendon 15-5-95, 9-point winners over Sydney 12-14-86. Some bad kicking by Sydney, and the Bombers taking their chances got them over the line. Yeah,
actually, it was a good game to watch this particular game, and you thought that Sydney would win this game, but I don't know where Essendon found the heart in the run that they did, but they played a very good brand of footy, and in the end, I've got to say, Sydney did themselves in a little bit by kicking a hell of a lot of points. They had a lot more scoring shots, and it did, 26-20, I think it was, and the usual Crows type thing, how you lose, but no, good luck to Essendon, and they actually. I thought they played very, very well, and they found a player, actually, the bloke in the back pocket, D'Ambrosio. They got him, I think, in the mid-season draft, and I think he had 20-odd possessions, and he's a beautiful left-foot kick. All right. Just hit players every time.
The Cats showing that North Melbourne, as bad as they are, still weren't as bad as Port Adelaide in that grand final. North only losing by 1-1-2 rather than 1-1-9. Cats 21-18, 144. North 5-2-32. You could just about close Arden Street down right now, couldn't you?
Yeah, I think there's enough to talk about there. They're not worth talking about.
Yeah. The next one, Gold Coast just letting this one go. 8-14-62, 5 points in the end. Collingwood 9-13-67. Stewie would be disappointed with this one. This would have got them right within a sniff of the 8, and now they've got their work cut out.
Yeah, he was spitting chips. They actually went out to a 18-point lead early. But Nick Dacos was outstanding in defence. I think he had 37 possessions in defence, and Toot Miller. I mean, he was outstanding for Gold Coast. It was a sort of a war of attrition for the rest of the game, and Collingwood just had those young players actually. Ginnivan kicked 3, and I think they were all first half goals. And Dacos absolutely controlling the play from the back. You've got 2 young players like that of that standard. That spells well for their future. what doesn't spell well for the rest of the year for them is Darcy Moore went down with a knee injury. I don't know how bad it is, but
it just looked like it looked like a hyperextension. So I don't think it was an ACL. I think it might have just been a medial or a meniscus or something. So it might only be a couple of weeks, I think.
Yeah, definitely not an ACL, I don't think, because it was a hyperextension. Yeah, you are right.
Yeah. The Tigers shrugging off a dogged Eagles by 35 points, 20 goals, 8, 128 to 13, 15, 93. The Eagles having to combat everything, even a mid-air bloody engine failure on the fly over, for God's sakes. How's this season going?
Yeah, I know you're not going well when that happens, that's for certain.
No, that's right. Just stay home for the rest of the year. The Giants, a strong win over Hawthorn. Wasn't that terrible conditions? 11-6-72, 22 points over Hawthorn, 7-8-50. It was a good, very solid match, but geez, I heard something like 87 soccers off the ground, a world record or something, and that was halfway through the last quarter, I think.
Yeah, but it still come back to that. Even in those conditions, the classy players for GWS stood out. The Whitfields, the Tarantos, Cornelios, players that were playing in their proper positions rather than when they were playing before, when they were playing out of position. So. Yeah. That GWS, it's pretty. I think they wasted several matches early in the season when the then coach was playing Cornelio up forward rather than on the ball, etc. So I think this coach has got them playing in the right positions and they're playing a lot better. He probably won't get the job, but he's done a good job.
My tip, Hurd has ruled himself out, says he doesn't want it, or so the club say that he doesn't want it. I don't know whether that's ducks and drakes or whether that's valid, but it doesn't look like it's going to be Hurd. It's smelling like Clarkson to me.
It does. It should be Clarkson.
Starting to smell like Clarkson. And Clarkson getting hold of a list like that, look out.
Look out. I'll tell you what, they will be a very good side if Clarkson gets hold of them.
Yeah, I reckon. And then the last game, a very entertaining game, I have to say. The Dockers, in the end, prevailing by 8 points, 15-9-99 to Port Adelaide, 14-7-91. And Macca, I know our shared dislike of all things Port, but I've got to say, wasn't that a reminder of what football looks like when a team just decides to try and score? Because that's what got Port Adelaide back into the game in the last quarter. They put all their good players in the positions they needed to, and they just decided, stuff defence, we're just going to try and score. And it was the old Malcolm Blight theory of score more than the opposition. And bar a couple of mistakes in front of goal, they would have won that game after being 40 points down.
Yeah, two bad misses there cost them the game.
Yeah. It was great to watch an attacking game.
I'm just so sad that they lost.
Oh, no, look, all that aside, I think it was a reminder of how defensive our game has become in so many ways, because you don't often see a game like that where a team just decides that they're just going to go all-out attack. And they got a couple early, which gave them some belief. I don't care what you say about Charlie Dixon. I'd have him in my team any day of the week, because the bloke plays with heart every day of the week. And he got them going. And like I said, a couple of you'd want the ball in Gray's hands, you'd want the ball in Marshall's hands, kicking those shots for goal. And the fact that they missed them was probably either nerves or exhaustion. I'm not sure what. Probably nerves on Marshall's behalf. But Freo got away with one there.
Yeah, look, Freo played very, very well. But like you said, sometimes when teams are in a position where they're unlikely to win the game and they take off all the breaks. They take off all the restrictions that they have on the players. They take off all the players dropping back. In other words, they just say, just go for it. And if you make a mistake, it doesn't matter. Just go for it. And obviously that was the issue with Port Adelaide, because they were never going to win it before that. And all of a sudden, it just looked like they'd changed jumpers, didn't it?
Well, they just forgot about tagging blokes, and they went with the old adage is if you get the ball first and your opposition don't get it, and blokes like Aish and that, they dropped out of the game in that last quarter. Aish had like some ridiculous amount of touches up to three-quarter time. Hardly got a sniff in the last quarter, and it was simply because his opponent decided to go and get the agate. So I enjoyed the game, and I enjoyed the comeback, and I enjoyed that it ultimately failed.
Well,
all right.
the thing about it, of course, the consequences are big because of, I don't think they can make the 8 now with the draw they've got and the number of games remaining. It would be really phenomenal if they made it. And what does that mean for Kenny?
Wow. I mean, it probably means he only gets a 3-year extension instead of 5, I guess. Let's have a look at the ladder, shall we? Let's have a look at the ladder.
Follow history, they will.
Yeah. So Melbourne game clear on top, 48 points. Geelong on 44 with Brisbane and Freo round out the top 4. We've got Carlton and Collingwood making a bit of a run, currently on 40 points. Richmond in the 8, along with Sydney on 36. St Kilda out of the 8. On percentage, also on 36 points. Western Bulldogs only a game behind, but then we've got the Suns and Port 2 games behind. I would say of the two of those, Gold Coast probably have the slightly easier run home than Port Adelaide, so that was such a crucial loss for Port in terms of them getting in. The Giants on 20, you would think, are too far out of it. Adelaide on 20 also. Then we've got Hawthorn and Essendon on 16. West Coast on 8 and North Melbourne barely still in the competition.
Just last thing, I'm a North Melbourne fan. Would you give them a priority pick? I wouldn't. I'll tell you why I wouldn't. Because they picked the wrong guy for coach. They kicked their good players out. Why should they get a priority pick?
Yeah. Look, I had a very able companion in Mick come on last week, Macca, and fill in in a pinch. And we were talking a little bit about this, and there's no way that I would give North Melbourne a priority pick for those very reasons. It's the fact that they didn't take either Adelaide or Richmond's deal for pick 1 last year was weak. And I know they would have got some backlash in terms of not taking a number 1, but they could have got 3 picks out of that. They need players desperately. Desperately, they need players. And they could have done with three first-round picks out of that draft. They've made some terrible list management decisions. Noble won't be there next year. I wouldn't mind betting that Adam Simpson is there next year coaching them. And if they get a priority pick, I think it'll be a travesty, to be honest.
Yeah, agreed.
So, look, that was the round. Of course, we're here to talk about Adelaide and Melbourne. Before we do, don't forget, if you're in the live audience, we are able to get you on the podcast. So don't forget, you can put your hand up and we'll have you on at any time if you want to have something to say. Don't be shy, we're live and interactive. Thanks to everyone who also is joining us either on chat in Discord or also on the YouTube chat. Don't forget, if you are watching on YouTube and you're liking what you're hearing, give us a like and a subscribe. I'd really love to get up to 500 subs by the end of the season. Really want to get up to 1,000 subs so we can start doing a little bit more community stuff, but unless we have a surge real late, we're not getting to 1,000 subs this season, mate. But 500 will be good. We're not far away from that. Alrighty. So, as mentioned before, Mac, 10-5-65, 30 or 29 points in the end. We went down to the D's, 14-10-94. What were your first impressions of the match, mate, overall?
One of the things I liked about the game, and there were things I didn't like about the game. What I liked about the game was that as an overall team, and ignoring certain individuals, but as an overall team, we were there 100% in body, mind, and spirit, and having a real 100% crack. The one thing leaving individuals out of it again. The one thing I really didn't like was we did it again in the last 4 or 5 minutes of the game. We allowed them to kick 4 goals and make a great effort look like an ordinary result with 29-point margin. So that was the thing that probably distressed me the most about the game, was that there were certain individual performances that were very, very good. There were certain individual performances that we'll talk about that weren't very, very good. But there were certain things that Nick's did which I didn't like as well. So we'll cover those as we go along.
Yeah, it's one thing that I'll certainly grant the coaching staff at Adelaide this year and the playing group is that it's not often we've come on and said they didn't try. We've had fade outs and we've had 1 or 2 games where we've been blown out a bit, but by and large this group has shown that they're capable of playing with heart, sustained pressure and desire. And that's a good trait to have. If you're gonna start your blueprint with something, that's not a bad blueprint to start with. You have a look at teams like GWS and Gold Coast who've had a lot of talent as they've been building a list, and what we've said about those teams often is that they lack heart. So we've started the other way. We've got plenty of heart. We've got plenty of players who show heart and toughness and are able to give multiple repeat efforts and put pressure on, etc., etc. We just don't have the talent and the polish at the moment. Now, whether that's personnel gap or whether that's maturity and experience, it's probably a bit of one and a bit of the other. But
definitely both.
But it is at least you can endure this rebuild knowing that you're going to see an effort, and we did definitely see an effort against a team that were up and about after last week's resurgent win over their main rivals. And to be honest with you, I expected us to get blown off the park because I thought Melbourne were back and they wanted to make a statement. But to our credit, we kept them in check for a long period during the game.
Yeah, and I still think that with a couple of things done differently, we might have even gone on to win the game. But and that sounds funny when you get beaten by 29 points. But that 29 points is not a true representation of how the game was played. And, as I say, the last 4 or 5 minutes, 4 goals. And you've got what was a mighty wrestle and played, as you said, with great heart, great spirit, great effort. And as I said, the finals margin didn't represent that because of that last 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah. As we usually do, let's have a quick look at selection. Massive outcry about Lockie Murphy getting selected. I would probably have agreed with that. I not so much because I thought necessarily that Newchurch should have got a run. I just didn't like the fact that Lockie Murphy was put in on the back of not much, and the reasons that Nick gave when he was put under the microscope, to me, were just irrelevant. It seemed like lip service was being paid there, and I just didn't like his inclusion. To me, it could have been Lockie Gallant, it could have been Tarek Newchurch, it could have been 1 or 2 others. Braden Cook for another one. Lockie Murphy, the way we had set up, to me, Mac, and I don't know what you think about this, I'll ask you, I guess. Once you select Riley in there to go with Texan and Darcy, you really, really need someone at their feet. And we still lack someone at their feet. We played James Rowe too high. Lockie Murphy always plays high. Neither of those, I think between Murphy, McHenry and Rowe, they've kicked like 2 goals 9 or something before this match for the season. So none of them have got small forward credentials. They've all got their strengths. Lockie Murphy isn't bad around stoppage. James Rowe isn't bad on transition when he plays high. He's got good smarts. But we needed a genuine small forward to get in there, to be at the feet of those big lads, and we just didn't have one.
Well, you're quite right. If we had a ranking, we would have won the game. There's no doubt about that. Because the opportunities were there. Also, got to be very critical of Rochelle as well. At the moment, I don't know what's driving Rochelle or not driving Rochelle because, the guy started off his career, and don't get me wrong, he's going to be a very good player in time. But his first 2 games were outstanding, and he's gradually got worse and worse, and he had a break, and I thought that would freshen him up, and he's just done nothing, absolutely nothing. So we can talk about Murphy, but I think Rochelle's the problem because of the fact that he is the man that in round 1 and round 2 would have been snaffling balls and kicking goals, but he's just not doing it.
So can you tell me what you think Rochelle's role is in the team at the moment?
I have no idea because he's not doing anything.
Exactly. I wonder whether he knows what his role is, because it's not obvious to me. He's not playing deep enough to be a crumbing small forward. We seem to have all these high half forwards running around, and no one designated to be at the feet of the tools. And look, I will have more of an issue with Murphy than Rochelle simply because Murphy's got nearly 70 games under his belt. And, Murphy could be selected in other roles, like if you wanted to play him around stoppage, but we're not selecting him on that basis, and therefore he shouldn't be in the team. He did nothing in the twos to suggest he should have been in the team, and I just feel like Nick's reason that he just added experience. Well, I mean, I think Murphy got, 9 touches for the game? So
he wasn't very good.
What's the point in that? There's just he's not offering us anything. And I would say to you that 9 or 10 Braden Cook touches might have been more valuable, or Lockie Gallant touches might have been more valuable than 9 or 10 Lockie Murphy touches. So, I mean, that was the one that they got sprayed about, and I think they were justified in getting sprayed about. The other 2, Chase Jones keeping his spot on the for Will Hamill with Lockie Scholl coming on as the Medi sub, that was probably realistic. Riley coming in, I didn't mind that at all. But yeah, it's hard for me to understand what Nick's selection philosophy is at the moment. And
the interesting thing about that, Pete, is you say that. Well, obviously the rest of the public did as well, because I've never seen a situation before where you've got the coach coming out and going on to everybody station around, trying to explain what they're expecting and why they haven't brought Newchurch in and why they've brought Murphy in. And if you think you've done the right thing, you as a coach, you don't go around and do that. You just play your players.
That worried me on a couple of levels, mate, because why is the club so sensitive at the moment to that situation?
Well, that's my point.
I mean, it's all like, yes, there was huge outcry. It's not as if there's not been outcry every time David McKay got selected for the last 5 years of his career, and they never came out and justified that. Why is it all of a sudden? To me, the club has become very, very sensitive to their supporter base lately, and that bothers me, because it seems to me that we've gone into justification mode, whereas if we had the courage of our convictions as a coaching panel and a selection committee, we'd just let the results do the talking. Do you know what I mean? So
that's exactly my point. If you as a coach genuinely think you have it 100% right and it's the right thing to do, you don't have to justify yourself. You talk about it after the game maybe, but you don't go around trying to justify it before the game.
Yeah. Yeah, and people in the chat rightly say low crowd numbers are driving that. Yes, absolutely. But low crowd numbers, like Nick's coming in and justifying why Lockie Murphy is going to play instead of, say, Tariq Newchurch, is not going to bring more people into the game. playing a recognisable brand of football is going to bring people in, and I think the fact that we're still getting 30,000 is because the players are having a dip, and so you're not walking away feeling ripped off because no one tried, but I think at this stage of our rebuild, we're 3 years into Nick's tenure, and to me, I don't see that there's been a lot of improvement in the last 12 months. And not only that, there's been some mystifying selections, not only this week, but over the course of the season. And not only that, a lot of senior players coming out in support of other senior players. And I haven't heard a senior player speak glowingly of a junior for the last, I don't know how long. And I wonder whether there's a bit of a fracture between, or a bit of a siege mentality going on with the current senior group, because they all seem to be circling the wagons and supporting each other at the moment.
Yeah, well, you're talking about like the Crouch situation, for example.
Yep.
And that I think it was Duday made the point that he thought that Crouch should have been in the side.
Duday's interview was horrific. Tex Walker made comments as well, saying, he hopes Crouch gets back in where he deserves to be and all this sort of stuff. What are they looking at? What are they actually? What message are they trying to send the future of the club? That at the moment they don't think that they deserve to be there, because there are blokes in the twos that deserve to be there, that are senior mates. And as a junior, I'd be looking at Matt Crouch and Luke Brown and these blokes, and Brodie Smith, for example. And even Tom Duday on his form at the moment, and saying, well, what's he doing that's better than what I could possibly bring?
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, Crouch is a bit of an exception in the sense, and I just want to be a little bit controversial about Crouch because of the fact that Crouch is a bloody good footballer, and but he's playing in the wrong club at the wrong time. And if you go back to 2017, I went back and I checked his stats back in 2017 when he was the club's best and fairest, and he was doing the same ratio of kicks and handballs, and roughly nearly almost, he's getting almost, well, he's getting as much now as he was then. But if you look at what he was playing in, he had Jacobs in the ruck who could actually direct the ball. He was probably the main receiver of the ball, and running alongside him was Brad Crouch, who would burst through like a bull, or Sloane, who at that stage 5 years ago had a lot of speed in his legs. So he had a totally different midfield and a totally different ruckman. In other words, he was a very good player. He hasn't changed, but everything around him has changed, which leaves him as an oddball sitting there. So we obviously can't play him, so the only thing we've got left to do is to trade him. But the problem is, if you don't play him, his trade value is going to be worse. And look, guy gets 40 possessions in the twos, and he gets again the next week 42 possessions. I mean, the guy can play football. It's not about that. It's just that what we've got at the moment is a ruckman that can't. He had what he had. It's some massive amount of hit outs, but 16 out of 48 actually went to one of our players. So that's the first thing. Then secondly, you've got Laird, who's not a speedster, and you've got Keys, who's more of a tough guy bursting out. So if you put Crouch in there, he doesn't. First of all, the ball's not likely to come to him, and secondly, hasn't got the speed to distribute to. He might be very good for Essendon or somebody like that, where they've got fast players in the middle, but he's actually a victim of circumstances in some ways.
I can see where you're coming from, Macca, and I know you and I vary a bit on this one. I can certainly see where you're coming from. What's going on with Macca's audio? Someone asked. It's because the internet has taken offence to what Macca's saying. Look, there's some subtle differences between 2017 and now with Matt Crouch. First of all, Matt Crouch was getting a lot more contested ball in 2017. He was a designated inside midfielder, whereas if you look at his stats over the last 12 months, he is being played more outside. He's not our go-to inside midfielder anymore, or he's certainly not getting the stats to represent that. And his use on the outside is no good at all. I'll point you to a patch in the second quarter where the Crows did get their midfield set up right, and Harry Schomburg got three or four sharks in a row off O'Brien's rucking. And every one of those, and it actually stood out to me this week as something that I think that they did change this week. Every one of those that Schomburg got, he handballed forward, right? Yeah, so yes, one of the key differences between that sort of setup and what Matt Crouch does is that Berry and Schomburg look to move the ball forward in congestion. Matt Crouch does not look to move the ball forward in congestion under pressure, right? And the other
I'm not saying he should be playing. The problem I'm saying is that put him in the right team with a good ruckman and speedy players around him, and he'll be a good player.
No. But I think you're wrong. I think you're wrong, because I don't think Matt Crouch. I think he's gotten in such a rut in terms of his, pardon me, ability to distribute the ball in an attacking manner, in an aggressive manner, that everything he does is defensive. Everything that he does is backwards. It's risk minimisation because of his own limitations. You know, Sam Berry will power through a contest with his hardcore. Pardon me, I'm sorry for my coughing tonight. With his strong core and get a handball running forward. Harry Schomburg started to show glimpses of his form of last year in being creative with his use of the ball and was always looking to move the ball forward. Matt Crouch doesn't do that. And the biggest reason why Matt Crouch doesn't do that, Macca, is because he doesn't have the power to get any sort of separation. And so he gets shut down real quick. So his baseline is to go backwards.
Well, I knew it would be controversial, but when I look back at why he was the club champion back in 2017 and what was he doing in 2017, it hit me what he was surrounded by as opposed to what he's surrounded by now. And so I think that, and we'll never have what he needs. So he obviously has to be a trade at the end of the year.
No, but you shouldn't have a situation where the team has to cater for the bloke getting the ball. That's not the way footy's played, Macca. The other thing that Matt Crouch used to do in 2017 was he was able to hit 20 to 30 metre passes on those diagonals. It used to be one of his strengths, the fact that he was able to change lanes with those passes by foot. He doesn't do that anymore. He doesn't do it anymore because he can't get free.
Well, I knew this was going to be controversial, but all I'm saying is I still think that he'll be a good player in the right team. And that's not our team.
Yeah, I just don't think. I don't think it's the players around Matt's fault that Matt doesn't fit in the Adelaide Crows team. I think that's victim blaming. You can't point your finger at Laird and Keys and say, well, you're not quick enough and that's why Matt's not any good. I mean, Laird has a similar quality with regards to his disposal out of the contest. Laird's disposal out of the contest is sketchy at best. And that's why I enjoy seeing the younger lads like Berry and Schomburg this week and Saligo at times and these lads that are actually comfortable moving through congestion, keeping their hands clear and trying to put the ball to the advantage of another player instead of just going out the back door all the time, taking the cheap option, pushing us back and forcing us to hack kick. we've seen that from the Adelaide Crows for years now, that we don't have enough explosive pace and we don't have any dynamism in that midfield combination. So we end up flicking it out the back and hat-kicking across our bodies to a bloody, a nil-all draw contest at high half forward.
I agree with you. No, I totally agree with you. And I'm not pushing for Crouch to go into the side. I'm just saying.
But
why I raised it is, I just say he can't fit into our side because of what the rest of the side is. Therefore, he has to go. That's what I'm really saying.
It's got nothing to do with the rest of the side. It's got to do with him, because he would have the same issue at any other team. Because he doesn't move the ball forwards, Macca. He moves the ball backwards.
That's okay if you're moving it backwards to Merritt, who then kicks it down the field. But anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, doesn't work like that. I admire your staunch defence of Matty Crouch. And look, I'm not saying that Matt's a terrible player. He's not a terrible player. You don't get the ball 40-odd times 2 weeks in a row if you're a terrible player. No doubt about it. But he has physical limitations that he hasn't been able to work on, and it doesn't look like he's going to be able to improve, that have seen his limited weapons diminish over the last couple of seasons, to the point where he can't get any separation from the contest whatsoever. He's got no strength, he's got no core strength, he's got no pace whatsoever, and he doesn't do any defensive running. So once the ball leaves congestion, he's a liability. You don't see him in link-up chains, Macca, at all. How many times do you see Matt Crouch offer an option? He's just running to the next contested situation. That's his primary focus. And you can't have a midfielder like that.
What I want to see is, I'd love to see the coach come out and say that he's not that he doesn't fit in our rotations at the moment, and he's a damn good player, and he'll be up for trade at the end of the year.
That's right. And look, this is the difference, I think, between the club as it is at the moment and as it was in the days of Neil Kerley. Because our club over the last 10 years has not been comfortable in publicly making those hard decisions, right? It started with Scotty Thompson, and we could go through a bunch of players, Richie Douglas, is another. Rory Sloane more recently is another. Matt Crouch now, where the club is not able publicly to make those decisions. They're acting more like a corporation with an eye to the share market, our share market being the court of public opinion and bums on seats, and less about a football club, that knows the decisions it needs to make and has the courage of its convictions to make those decisions and allow the results to fuel bums on seats. Because it was those results that got bums on seats in the first place back in the day, remember? After the initial hysteria wore off and we were getting belted every week, we were still getting people going to games because the club was willing to make decisions and acting like a football club. It's not acting like a football club anymore, and hasn't for a long, long time. So I agree with you. The coach does need to come out and say that. But
that's what bothers to do. Because I'm sick and tired of saying, we put him back in the twos and get him to improve his game. No, he plays a certain way, and it's not going to ever fit into our game. But I'm not saying that it won't fit into somebody else's, because if you get the ball that many times. So the coach, I wish he'd stop bullshitting and just say that, come out and say it.
Yeah, and this is what happens and this is the problem that Nick's faces, I think. And we were always going to get to this point, because Nick's number one mandate was to reunite the club, to repair the culture, because it was completely fractured. The club did what it could. It got rid of all the old wood and all the rest of it. But it was up to Matthew Nicks and Dan Jackson and a few others to rebuild the culture and look, you don't get a team coming out and putting in the effort that it did on the weekend and doing so most weeks of the season if they're not, playing for the same. They're not singing from the same hymn book. They definitely are singing from the same hymn book. But I reckon there'd be some young lads at the moment going, hang on a minute, what's going on here? There are some blokes that are just not performing, and they seem to be measured differently. So I think Nicks has achieved what he needed to. The measure of Matthew Nicks over the next 12 months is whether he can now turn the page and say, all right, boys, we've got this back on track. We've got a good base of work ethic, and now we need to toughen up and make some hard decisions. And whether he can bring them along for that part of the journey will be the measure of whether Matthew Nicks is a very good coach or whether he was just a good man manager. And nothing wrong with Nicks just being a good man manager, but if that's all he is, then we will need a new coach to get us to the next level, in my opinion.
Well, I agree with everything you've said so far, and I don't think we're really disputing all that much about Matt.
No, we're not. No, we're not.
Because my point is, I think he's got value, but not in our team. And I'd like Nicks, instead of bullshitting away about, he's got to improve this, he's got to improve that. He can't come back in our side and be useful. But he could be in another team, and we should make that very clear, and we should be talking to other clubs about trading him.
Now, Macca, just to break it up, we've got Seas Girl who wants to have a chat. First time, I think, for Seas Girl. You're on mute there at the moment, but take yourself off mute. Seas Girl, how are you going?
Hey, guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Loud and clear. Love to hear it.
Thanks, guys. Look, I purely just came on board tonight to say thank you very much for the tickets that I won for the game. It allowed my brother's whole family to actually come as a family for the first time. And my 7-year-old nephew actually got to go to his first game. So thank you very much.
Jesus, how many bloody tickets did we give you, Nikki? Full disclosure, Seeds Girl and I know each other, so that's why I called her Nikki, because that's actually her name. Sorry about that.
That's all right. With Dad not being able to go, it actually allowed my sister-in-law to go too. So yeah, we had a bit of a family day, so it was nice.
Seeds Girl, tell us what you thought of the game on Saturday.
Oh, don't ask her that. We'll be here for 3 hours.
Well, like what's been said is fantastic first half. Probably the last 3 minutes of the second quarter, I could see things not going the way they should be. But yeah, the second half just a bit of a disaster. As soon as Petrarca went in the middle, we had no one to follow him. It very much changed with Petrarca going in the middle. So, yeah.
Also, Petrarca was very dangerous up forward as well.
Yes, yeah, he was. But he was doing a lot more damage in that midfield than he was in that forward line.
Yeah, he's not a bad player, actually, is he?
Well, he's a star, isn't he?
He's just silky smooth. Very cool. I rate him highly as a player. I actually rate him higher than Oliver. So yeah.
If you could only take one, it'd be a toss of the coin. I'm a big fan of Clayton Oliver, but
I'll be taking Petrarca straight away.
Yeah. I'm with Feed. I'd go for Oliver because he's the workhorse, and he just never lets you down.
Yeah, you wouldn't go wrong with either of them, though, I don't reckon.
But he wasn't really performing until they started getting on top either. So
it's not because Petrarca's a better looking one, is it, Seeds Girl?
Absolutely, everything to do with that.
Well, no. Well, I watch AFL 360, and he's quite intelligent on that. So I do tend to rate him not just a footballer, but as a football mind. But yeah, no. So yeah, there was a funny incident at the footy, which was quite funny that happened between me and Petrarca, but I'll leave that there.
Very good. Thank you, Nikki. I'll see you tomorrow. All right, very good. And that's just a reminder, if anyone else wants to have something to say, feel free during the course of the evening. Mac, let's have a look at some head-to-head stats, shall we? Set this up. Alrighty. So, disposals 342, 369, not that big a disparity, really. Inside 50s, 46 to 52, which wasn't too bad. Disposal efficiency for both teams was down. It wasn't that bad a day, so it's just indicative of the pressure, I think, that both teams were putting each other under. That disposal efficiency was down. Contested positives, pretty much the same. Uncontested, Melbourne slightly on top there by about or just under 30. So they did get the ball on the outside a little bit easier than we did. Turnovers were pretty much similar. Hit-outs, as you said, the disparity in hit-outs was ridiculous, 57 to 13, but as Goodman pointed out, you just instruct your midfield to ruck to the opposition ruckman, and then it kind of nullifies that, and that's where I don't think we threw enough looks at Melbourne's midfield. I think we could have used Thilthorpe more. I think he only attended 4 CBAs for the day. So I think we could have used Riley a bit more just to change up the configuration a bit. I think we could have also had O'Brien coming in from different angles. We had a little patch there where as I mentioned before, where we're getting Schonberg free, but we seemed to be one-trick ponies. As soon as Melbourne started covering that, we didn't have a second option. So it kind of showed up O'Brien's limitations in terms of his rucking ability, don't you think?
I think he's very limited as a ruckman because, the idea of a ruckman is not just to jump up and hit the other player. It's actually to get a hand onto the ball and already have a pre-arranged plan of where he's going to hit the ball so the other players know what to do. I don't think Rob's got anything like that in his kit bag at all. If he says it, he's certainly not doing it. He had 16 effective hit-outs, and this is 48 that he had. So 1 in 3 got to one of our players, and that's probably more the players' good effort than Rob putting it down their throat. And it's having played on ball, it's beautiful when you've got a ruckman who can actually tell you where he's going to hit the ball and actually do it because he makes it look good when it's really him doing it. And unfortunately, Rob's not that man.
No.
So he tries, he gives you 100% of what he's got, but it's not enough.
Yeah, I said a few podcasts back that O'Brien taps it to the spot that's most convenient for him, which is usually straight in front of him or over his left shoulder sometimes. But it doesn't matter which way the ball's going; it's whichever way he's facing is basically where the ball goes. So he's very easy to you don't have to read him very hard. So for an opposition to rove from him, it's not a difficult thing. Clearances, 12 to 14 in the middle and 22-25 around the ground. Not a bad effort considering the differences in pedigree of the two midfields, I thought. Marks, 80 to 99, they certainly did us aerially. 8 to 15 inside 50. Disappointing considering the selection of the third tall. I would have expected that we might have had a few more marks up forward. Certainly after a hot start, Tex fell away. Darcy tried very hard but was held aerially, and Riley just isn't an aerial force up forward in contested situations at the moment.
Well, really, he's compounded there, Fane. Lever had 7 intercepts and May 11. So, that's 18. So,
well, look.
That reinforces your point.
How many times have I said that we're always one possession short going in a forward 50? So our entries are too shallow and they go exactly where the intercept player is, whether it be Tom Stewart for Geelong or Jake Lever for Melbourne or bloody whoever it was for St Kilda that I've forgotten now, Brad Hill maybe, or I can't remember. But we do not seem to learn. And there are teams like Geelong play the same way every time we play them. Melbourne play the same way every time we play them. And we do not seem to put any thought into our forward entries. I would kill to be the forward line coach down there, because I reckon just about anyone could be the forward line coach down there and get better bloody results than what we're getting at the moment, because there is just no connection between our midfield transition and our forward entries. It's actually driving me insane, because it's not a difficult thing.
Well, the other teams make it look easy enough, Dean. We make it look very, very difficult. It's really that shallow entry that you say around the 40 metre mark that kills you every time.
Fucking drives me crazy, Mac. It really does. Sorry for the language, but it really does. And we've got two of the best leading forwards in the competition. Taylor Walker is probably second only to Hawkins at the moment in terms of being an absolute bull on the lead, right? And we just don't use that advantage. We don't run patterns, and we don't spread across lanes when we're transitioning the ball. We're always down the one lane, so we draw all the congestion to one side, and then we kick it to that area of congestion instead of drawing the congestion to the one side, switching lanes and kicking to the open side and letting a Darcy Fogarty or a Tex Walker run into some space. We just continually kick it on people's heads, and half the time we're too shallow and our blokes are playing too deep, and they don't even make a contest. It absolutely drives me nuts. It's so fundamental, Macca.
It is. And I thought we compounded a little bit our loss a little bit by the fact that this is where I want to have a go at Nick's, in the sense that he moved Dawson up into that pack where the ball gets bombed into. Now, Dawson did manage to get a goal, but in that last quarter, when he sat there for so long and just wasting the best player on the ground. He was just wasted, just sitting there, and in the meantime, Melbourne are scoring goals, and I thought to myself, this is just madness. Eventually, he brought him out, but too late.
It really bugs me how Nix is using Dawson, and I mentioned this with Mick last week, and at one stage towards the end of the season, Mac, and maybe around trade time, we'll have a look at our squad, and we'll name a team where we feel like every player is playing in their best position, and if there's no good player in that position, we'll leave it blank. And I like Geordie Dawson is a dead set wingman, right? 100% dead set wingman. You want him getting the ball forward of centre and kicking those darts into forward 50, right?
Yeah.
He's been fantastic behind the ball this year, but in the process, the knock-on effect is that Duday has had to play too tall, and we've actually killed Duday's ability to be an intercept defender. Now, whether that's because Duday is injured and his hand or his wrist or whatever the hell he's carrying is not allowing him to be effective in that role. If Duday is injured, then play bloody Billy Frampton as the bloody intercept defender, for God's sakes. Billy Frampton has shown that as a third tall option whose job is to intercept, mark and deliver instead of being accountable for a key key forward, he can actually do that. So why not have Butts and Murray as your key defensive posts and have Frampton as your third man up, where Frampton can just run in without accountability, which is what Frampton can do. You know, we haven't even tried it. So we basically sacrificed Dawson for large parts of the game in a role that, yes, he's good at, but all he's doing is stopping them scoring. He's not actually been involved in huge amounts of our scoring chains because he's been played too deep on the ground.
Yeah, look, and to his credit, he just plays well wherever you put him. But, yeah, you've got to put him where he's the most effective, and you're quite right, Dean.
Yeah. Well, where he's... If you want to make yourselves hard to play against, then you've got to play blokes like Dawson in the positions that are going to cause the most pain for the opposition. Now, Dawson is a pain in the neck, surely, for opposition teams playing across half back, but it's not insurmountable, right? Whereas if you put Dawson on a wing, all of a sudden you're actually having to worry about him because he's having more influence on the scoreboard from our perspective. So anyway, we'll go to individuals a bit more in a minute.
The only thing I will say about Dawson playing in defence is that at least when he's back there, the defence looks organised. And yes, I prefer. You're right that it'd be better for us to play on a wing, but at the moment, Tom Duday, who should be the organiser back there, he's not in the best of form, and it only just looks good when Dawson goes back.
Yeah, but what else have we tried, Mac?
Oh, look, I'm going to agree with you. But we have to try other things.
To me, and just straying off the thing a little bit, this is something that occurred to me before. When Nick's first started, right, in the first year and a half, 2 years maybe, one of the things he used to say consistently is he wants to be able to allow players to show their weapons. Remember, that used to be one of the things he used to say consistently, right? He wants to put players in positions where they can show their weapons. But in the last 12 months, he has changed that 180 degrees, because he is now not doing that. He is now not putting players in positions where they can be showing off their weapons and being the most problem for the opposition. Because if he was, Jordan Dawson would be on a wing. What he's doing now is coaching the team to not lose by too much, and by putting blokes like Dawson in Brent Riley's old role as an unaccountable halfback flanker, an inset marker.
Good point.
Well, we spent 2 weeks of the trade period and gave up a first round pick to get Geordie into the club, and we had to convince Geordie to come here. And I'm sure the dream that got sold to Geordie wasn't, you're going to play loose in defence. Surely not.
No, he was actually told he was going to be playing midfield and maybe up forward.
100%. 100%. And here we are. And you reckon Geordie'd be happy? I wouldn't be.
Well, I think he's the type of footballer, and I've watched him right from his very first game. He's the type of footballer that just seems happy to play wherever he's put, because he gives 100%. He's just an honest player.
Oh, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Tommy, but that doesn't make it right, Mac. Tommy in the chat says Hinge is the inset halfback flanker. I actually agree with you, Tommy. I reckon Mitch Hinge is very much developing into that kind of player. Tom Duday, if we actually let him play the role that he's supposed to be playing, which is a third tall, not a second tall, then he would still be that player. I think Tom actually needs a spell, because it just doesn't look right to me. There's something going on with his wrist or his hand or whatever. I'd love to understand what that is. But just putting Dawson back there is cheat code in my view. It's the easier option, and Nix is covering his ass by doing it. He shouldn't be. He should be trying other things. We've got Josh Worrell in the twos, who had a really good vein of form, who could have been tried in a role down back, wasn't tried.
And should have been.
We've got James Borlase. Now, some of these kids, they haven't been setting the world on fire in the twos, but they haven't been playing badly in the twos either. And we're in a rebuild, for God's sakes. You've got to try things. At the moment, there's a sameness about Adelaide that suggests our best 22 is set, and there's just absolutely no reason why our best 22 should be set right now. There's no reason for it. It clearly can't be set. We don't have a team that can contend yet, so you can't have a settled lineup, in my view. It's not logical.
Oh, I agree with you, Frank.
Anyway, tackles 76-65 in our favour. Tackles inside 50-11 apiece. 1% is 39 to 47. I don't know what that measures. So, statistically, not dissimilar in terms of, there wasn't anything glaring, I didn't think, that stood out. But it was just basically their class when they had the ball. We made some fundamental mistakes. I thought, Mac, that a team like Melbourne will get you on every time. Poor old Nick Murray letting a couple get behind him, and he has to get better at that. If he's going to make a contest, he's got to kill the contest. He can't let the ball go over the back, and he does that. It's a trait of his that he has to get out of because it costs us a couple of goals.
He's got a lot to learn. There's things I like about Murray, and what I really like about him is the fact that he's aggressive, he's physical, he's not frightened. He'll have a crack, but the thing is, he's not skilled, and he needs a lot of work in terms of how to play that position, and also just to get his basic ideas of how to be a proper defender. He needs a lot of work put into him.
Yeah, we got someone else on board, Mac, tonight. Tomo, I don't think we've had you on before. How you going?
Hello, Fiend and Macca. Pretty good, yeah.
Nice to see you come aboard, Tomo. Tell us all about it, mate.
I actually was going to talk about Dawson and Hinge. Stole it a little bit with the intercept role. I don't think Hinge is a wingman. I think he should be playing that halfback intercept role.
Agreed.
With Dawson on the wing, and then if needed, you can have Dawson rotating back as he does, but I want him primarily on the wing. And I also liked Miller on the wing in the fourth quarter.
Well, interesting you mentioned Miller because I reckon off memory that he only had 11 possessions up to three-quarter time, and he got 9 in the last quarter when he was moved up there. So that sort of backs up your point.
Yeah, I just can't believe the coaches are still persisting with Haley on the wing because he got absolutely killed by Langdon all game, and Melbourne were just going right through Langdon the entire game, and that's where they got most of their scores from, just off his speed.
Great point, Tom. I was going to actually raise that because of the fact that much as I like Jackson Haley, his only ability to play in our team is if he plays as a tall mid. But on the wing there, he is getting slaughtered because he is slow of foot. And on the weekend, he stood the fastest bloke on the ground. So, I mean, yeah, you're 100% spot on, mate. Very good call.
Yeah. I was actually really grateful of the midfield rotation for the first two quarters. I thought it was really, it showed a completely different dynamic.
I like that.
And one last point on just Berry being... He's really explosive, Berry, watching the game live. I was really impressed with him. It's just his kicking was a bit shocking today, yesterday.
Well,
I think with
Berry, I think he had about 20 possessions and about 12 or 13 tackles.
Yeah.
So the guy really puts in, and it's that last finishing bit that he's got to improve. So, Tom, you've been right on all three things, mate.
I think Sam just needs a little bit of composure. By foot, he's actually not a bad kick, but he gets a bit rushed sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
But he's certainly he's a 200 game player for us in that midfield rotation because he's an absolute bulldog. He doesn't stop trying. He puts physical hurt on blokes, and he's only 2 years into his career. And he's already leading stats in pressure acts and all the rest of it in the league, for goodness sakes. Get a bit more into his legs and Burjo maybe just getting his burst speed up a little bit so he can get a little bit more separation and allow him to settle over his kicks, and I reckon he'll be an absolute gun.
Yep, that's really all I had to say. Oh, well, actually, one more thing. With mainly Rochelle and Phil Thorpe, I really feel like they're getting in their heads a bit too much.
Yep.
I think watching the game, I really felt Phil Thorpe, at least from what I noticed, is really in his own head and just is completely lacking confidence.
Really, Tom, you're a very astute caller, mate. I'm a bit worried you might get my job. You're 100% right, but Rochelle is the same. If you go back to that Rochelle when he played his first two games, you thought this is going to be the best player in our team by far.
Yeah, pure extent.
And yet, if you looked at the Rochelle the way he played on the weekend, I'm not sure whether he had 4 touches, 5 touches, something miserable. And and the same with Thilthorpe. He was a 5-goal on his debut. I just thought, this is absolutely brilliant. But again, he's playing nowhere near that when he first came in, and it's all in the head. You did right. It's all in the brain.
Yeah, so that was my points, and I still don't know what Filth is going to be. Some people want him as a key. I am more for him being more. Try and get him as much like Paddy Ryder as possible is what I think is the type of player we should be looking at. Someone who's really good in the ruck, also can go forward if needed.
I think that's where he ends up, Tomo.
Get rid of Nixie and bring Tomo around.
Yeah, I reckon. I think that's where Thilthorpe ends up. Tomo. It might take him a few years to get to that, but I think he is probably a genuine ruckman who can play forward rather than the other way around. And having his skills around the ground as a ruckman will be invaluable. And he will, if he continues to improve as projected, he'll be one of the premier ruckmen in the comp in a couple of years' time if we don't coach it out of him.
Well, something's happened with Rochelle, because when he first couple of games he played, he wanted every ball that went up there to be his ball. At the moment, he's playing as if I'll watch everybody else get the ball.
Well, does that indicate, Macca, something of what I was maybe referring to earlier in the podcast about there being maybe a little bit of a disconnect between the seniors and the juniors?
It could well be that, or it could be that it's just too hard for a young player to, and I know that Dacos is an exception, but too hard for a young lad to come in at that level, and they've got massive enthusiasm, and they do well, and then very hard for them to maintain that standard, and then they may get down on themselves, and once you get down on yourself as a player, there's only one direction you'll go, and that's down.
Well, we had this debate last week, and Mick, I'll get you on in a sec. On the one hand, you could think that maybe it was resilience, and I put that up as a possibility. But to be perfectly honest with you, I think it's actually one of the fundamental issues that Nix is going to face over the next 12 months, as I mentioned before. I think trust between players and coach is a big thing, but trust by the coaches towards players is a massive thing. If a player doesn't feel like the coach trusts him, then he will not be mentally 100%. And at the moment, I think there'd be some players in the Adelaide team who would feel that the coach doesn't necessarily trust their abilities, doesn't trust them to do a role. And I wouldn't mind betting that Josh Rochelle fits in that category. I would say that Josh Rochelle would feel that he can do more, and I think that perhaps he's been asked to play a very specific role at Adelaide in the current configuration, and perhaps he is more suited to be given a bit of a license to say, go and get the ball and do something with it.
I see Rochelle exactly as that, as a player who has no restrictions put on him, because he's got a very good football brain. He showed that in his first couple of games. I mean, you just can't walk into AFL footy and do that unless you're good. So, but at the moment, yeah, I think you're right. I think he's role playing, and role playing is just killing him.
Yeah, he's Robbie Gray like.
Yeah, Robbie Gray. He doesn't play to anybody in his instruction. He just does his own thing.
Yeah. Thanks, Tomo. Good input, mate. Nice to have you on board.
Good work, guys. Tomo. Yeah, good work, Tomo.
Right, we got your biggest threat, Macca. Now, Mick, how you going, Mick?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Good to hear you again, Macca.
Mate, good. Tell me you did very, very well last week, and well done, mate.
Just a poor one from the seconds to cover you, mate. Got a couple of questions for you, learned gentlemen. How many games would you say people have to play before they start having the confidence to pull off the kicks that you require them to, and actually settle down and really start finding their straps in the AFL.
Oh, you're leading here, Mick. Just make your point, Mick. Don't be a bastard.
Well, I was just thinking that usually people say between 50 and 70 before they actually start hitting their straps.
How many games has Nick Dacos played?
Weekend, yes. You come across a freak. How many of them have you seen, Thane?
He's a freak.
Usually in the first round there's a fair few. Jason Horne-Francis, Patrick Dangerfield.
Well, he's not exactly pulling off exactly the same as Dacos.
Well, he's had a couple of games like Dacos. Anyway, go on, make your point.
We had 11 players on the ground on the weekend that have played under 50 games. We had a further 6 that have played less than 85 games, including Ben Keys at 83.
What's your point, Mick?
You start talking about, and what made me actually do this study, because I started to grit my teeth with all the, everything's shit, sack the coach, comments that were going on.
Hang on.
In the chat. No, not you, in the chat. Thanks,
okay.
In the chat.
Righto.
Yeah. I think it's such a young list as that. As I said last weekend, they start off at a more basic level of what the game plan will eventually turn into. And to be where we are, with 11 players that have played under 50 games, to take the current, the current side that's number one in the league, they won last year's grand final, and to take them as far and push them as far as we did, I don't think we can sit here and say we did that badly.
Who do you think? Who do you think we're pointing the fingers at when it comes to reasons why we probably didn't win?
Yes, our more senior players, and I agree. I don't think Rob is our future, and I said that last weekend. I think I'd love to see Phil Thorpe in the ruck. I said that last weekend, mate. I'm not saying, but I'm not.
We're not blaming the young kids.
Having a go at you, Fiend, or a go at Macca. I'm more saying about
I'm fired up. Come on.
Stuff I'm seeing in the chat and elsewhere. It's starting. We said 3 years ago when this rebuild started that it was going to take a few years, and the Adelaide Crows fans have to realise that this is a rebuild and it's going to take time. And we were mature and we were going to give the club time. And the previous administration had undersold us and thought we couldn't be mature and watch a rebuild go. Well, some of the comments that I've seen tonight and some of the comments I've seen elsewhere makes me believe that maybe they didn't undersell us, because there's a lot of people out there that raving on about sack this person, sack that person, and it's just got to stop.
Oh, Mick, I think you're I think you're being a little bit sensitive, to be honest with you, because it's always the squeakiest wheel that gets the most oil. There are 650,000 Crow supporters in Australia, and what you're talking about is maybe 100 people on social media that have got nothing better to do with their time, that get up and about on Facebook or Twitter and half of them are probably Port supporters just trolling anyway. I think most people who are genuine Adelaide Crows supporters, their biggest gripe about how the rebuild is being handled has got nothing to do with the abilities of the younger players. I think most people are unsettled and confused about the continual selection of certain players at the expense of the development of some other players. The biggest uproar that we've had on social media for ages was about Lockie Murphy getting selected over Tariq Newchurch this week. Now, yeah. Lockie Murphy isn't a senior player, but he's played 70 games. And we've seen that he's not a goal scorer. We've seen that the club don't want to play him in the position to which he's most suited, which is basically a clearance midfielder. So, and his form in the twos didn't really warrant reselection. So, I think it's a bit disingenuous to look. You're always going to have the mad fringe who throw the baby out with the bathwater, and start saying, sack the coach and blah 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 blah. But I would say that most people are comfortable with going through a rebuild if that's in fact what we're doing. I think the questions that are being asked now is, are the club actually doing a rebuild, or are they just letting a rebuild happen organically through the passage of time?
I'd say 11 players that played under 50 games is having a rebuild thing.
Well, only because there's no option. There's no option. We had 2 players playing in the twos who could have boosted that. But basically, we're a young list, so we're going to have players under 50 games. But it's about where they're played, it's about how they're played, etc., etc. And to me, at the moment, it feels like a rebuild by association rather than any sort of concerted developmental rebuild at the moment.
Well, I think we had a fair mix going through the midfield this week.
Probably the best we've ever had.
Going there. He only played 9 games.
Probably the best we've had all season, Mick, this week. I agree with that.
I was pretty happy with the way the midfield operated this week.
But Mick, that is the first time they've done that.
I'm not disagreeing with that either. And I do not want to see Matt Crouch back in the side. There's no way.
None of us do.
No, it can't happen. Like that will put back the rebuild. And something you said earlier, I think, before I get off tonight, is you said about older players coming out and backing Matt Crouch, and they seem to have their own agenda. I've seen that for the last few years, that this older group is just so far up each other's bums, it's not funny.
Oh,
they
100%.
just can't see that when someone's not playing well, they don't see that. They just want their old mate in the side again. And it's a complete boys' club. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, there is definitely that. There is that element there. There's no doubt about that. And because the ones who have spoken up for Crouch are the elder player. So, and yet, if you have a look at what we did on the weekend, and when we just put the younger players through there, and we look much, much better through the midfield.
I love Berry's game on the weekend. I thought it was
fantastic.
Great.
He was great. And I absolutely adore Soligo as a player. He is going to be one of our very, very best players in the long term. Every time he goes out there, he just is 100%. And if you have a look at the amount of ground he covers, there's other players that have done the wrong thing and left their man on their own. He tries to cover his, he tries to cover the other person's, and look, his work rate is fantastic. And look, your point was very valid, Mick, to a degree, in the sense that it's very hard to knock what's going on because of the fact of we're playing a lot of junior players who haven't got a lot of experience behind them. And now and again, though, I think now and again, and that will happen in every side, the coach will make a mistake and put the wrong player in, or they won't play the right player because we're talking about, the boys' club type thing. And that happens with every football club. My main grief about the Adelaide Football Club is nothing with so much what's going on the field, but the mistakes that have been made in the past with the selection of players in draft gone by, which have really put us in a situation that we're in.
Yeah, I had a bit of a gripe about that last weekend, Macca, and I seem to think that sort of stopped when Matty Nix comes in, and I don't know whether that was so much our recruiters or whether it was our previous coach having too much of a say on who he wanted, because before our previous coach got in, we seemed to be picking well, and then we seem to be picking well since he left.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is Adelaide Football Club used to have a policy, and that happened because of Gary Ayres. with that particular draft pick that year, Lawrence Angwin, who overrode the selection, all the draft people. And they had a rule in that the coach couldn't overrule the list committee. That coach was supposed to tell the list committee what players they wanted, and then the list committee would come back to the coach and say, "This is what we've got for you." And that didn't happen. And you're quite right. And you're talking about Pike now, aren't you? Pike, Pike overrode the list committee.
Yeah, and I think that was one of their lead up to disasters, because if someone's spending all their time on thinking you need this type of player, then your coach says, no, we want this type of player. Maybe someone slipped through the cracks, but we can't change that now. We can look at what we've got on our list now.
So Mick,
and I'm actually quite happy with a lot of the ones we see on our list, except some of them are definitely being played out of position.
Speaking of which, Mick, when Jackson Hately gets dropped this week for Matty Crouch, and Matty Crouch goes straight back into the middle, and we push, I don't know, maybe Harry out to a wing or something like that, will you come back on and say, yeah, Finn, you were right?
You will hear from me if that does happen, yes, because I will be out there with my pitchfork and burning steak alongside of you, Finn. Good
on you, mate. Love your input as always, Mick.
Hately needs to go in the mids. He can't. He's not a winger. He has to be a midfield rotation.
Well, he's either midfield rotation or out, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. I mean, I can see him. They used to play him somewhere off of half forward to rest, rather than just playing him off the bench. Maybe I don't know who else. Another midfielder that can swap out of the midfield onto the half forward, then on the bench. But there needs to be something there, because he's not a winger. I mean, he's got the fitness to do the kilometres. I'm not saying he's not, but you can run those same amount of Ks at a kilometre slower than the next person. You're not going anywhere near him, are you?
No, he got slaughtered, absolutely slaughtered.
Yeah,
thanks,
and he's
Mick.
Too good a player. We've seen that 3 games. He's too good a player to see go to waste.
Got to push along, Mick, but thanks very much for your input, mate. And thanks again for last week. Much appreciated.
Tonight.
See ya.
Well done, mate.
Very good. Thanks, Mick. And still plenty of time if other people want to come on and have something to say as well. Everyone's input is always appreciated. Mac, let's just quickly whiz through some individuals. I won't go too hard at this. Lairdy, 32 touches, 16 and 16. He had 9 tackles, 6 clearances, 560 metres gained, 9 inside 50s, 5 score involvements, 5 intercepts, 11 contested possessions.
First quarter, and he really revved up for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I thought his second half was good.
Well, he was he's probably our best player in the second half, but his first quarter was rather quiet, very quiet by his standards. Second quarter was a bit better, but I thought he was outstanding in the second half.
Yeah. Geordie Dawson, 30 touches, 25 and 5, had 10 marks, 2 tackles, 649 metres gained, had 7 inside 50s, which is what you want from Geordie, 4 score involvements, 8 intercepts, 8 contested possessions. Very hard playing a Mr. Fix-It role, band-aid all across the ground, hard to get rhythm in your game, but as you mentioned earlier, Mac, he's the sort of player that's no nonsense, no fuss. Coach tells him where to go and he plays excellently wherever, so good from him.
Yeah.
Benny Keys, one of the worst 30-touch performances I've seen, 15 and 15, 6 tackles, 6 clearances, 398 metres gained, 5 inside 50s, 4 score involvements, 15 contested possessions. I feel like we're starting to see some of Ben's limitations really starting to be magnified. He's extremely one-sided, and his lack of polish at times is really frustrating.
Yeah, look, he did kick a couple of goals, which was surprising. and they were pretty good kicks. He's got to be a very good player. He's good. Nobody works hard on him. Nobody in the side works hard, and he gets the ball and often burns it just because of rubbish kicking. If he can polish up that side of his game, he can be a good weapon.
Yeah, look, maybe. Jake Saligo, excellent. 20 disposals, 9-11, had 5 marks. Pardon me, 2 tackles. Let's have a look. 2 inside 50s, 2 score involvements. Only went at 65% disposal efficiency, 9 contested possessions. Just building nicely, Jake. Will be interesting to see how much he's got left in the tank, because he's working hard inside, and there's not a lot of him. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him just tail off a little bit in the next couple of weeks.
I'll tell you, I loved his game, and you talk about his efficiency with his disposal. Most of that was because he was in there getting very, very hard balls. Whereas under great pressure. So he's in some of those balls are very hard, and I just love him. I just think he's a great player.
Oh, no doubt about it. I'm not having a crack at him at all. All I'm, I guess, saying is that I think that it'll be a measure of him to see how far through the season he can get before he starts to run out of steam.
He's improving every week, thing.
I know he's improving every week, and he's getting more involved. Or I'm saying it'll be interesting to see how much he can take now that he's more heavily involved in the game before he runs out of puff. It wouldn't surprise me if he tails off in a couple of weeks' time, just from the physical attrition. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Look, he earns a lot of his balls. He really does.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. Tom Diday, 19 touches, 10 and 9, 2 marks only, 266 metres gained, 8 intercepts, 7. It just looks a little bit like a deer in the headlights at the moment, Tommy, doesn't he? I'm 100% sure he's carrying something.
There's definitely something wrong with him. There's no doubt about that. And he's not marking the ball like with the same authority that he normally did. And he did have that problem with one of his hands, didn't he?
He's still got that, I think. He seems to be cupping the ball when he's handballing rather than holding the ball. And he seems to be, like, his ball drop when he kicks it seems to be all over the shop. He's not gripping the ball, and I'm sure it's his right hand that's got tape all over it. So, I don't know, he seems to be hampered. Anyway, Miller, as you suggested, in that last quarter, we got a little bit of a sniff, and I think Miller is a dead set defensive wingman or running halfback. He's always looked better when he's running out the ball, in my opinion, Mac. Running
halfback for me.
Yeah. So his second half, he got better as the game went on. Sam Berry, as we've already talked about, an absolute ball, 17 touches, 13 tackles, if you don't mind. Pardon me. Only went at 53% disposal efficiency. And surprisingly, only 9 of his possessions were contested, but the amount of hurt he puts on the opposition. I mean, he was tackling big bodies. Melbourne is a mature list of big-bodied players with, a lot of physical development in them. He's a second-year player who was, matching them, tackle for tackle, and just an excellent game from Sam, I thought, despite the fact that he turned it over a bit.
Great game, yeah.
Mitch Hinge, I think, is a bit underrated by many people. He's one of my more favourite players, playing off halfback, 16 touches, 10 and 6, 4 marks, only 221 metres gained. I think we could use him a little bit more as an outlet player across halfback. Not sure whether he's good enough aerially to be an out-and-out intercept defender, but he's certainly a distributor of halfback.
Beautiful leg on him.
Yeah, and certainly well worth persevering with. Riley O'Brien, we've talked about him. Absolute leg up. The thing that pissed me off the most about Riley O'Brien is the fact that Riley O'Brien only took 3 contested marks for the game and only took 5 marks in total. Macca is by far the tallest man on the ground. He took 5 marks for the game.
Yeah, that's poor. Very poor.
At no stage did we see Riley O'Brien really try to stretch them, to really try and impose himself on the game. He should have been the dominant man on the ground. He should have been offended, Macca, that Melbourne decided that they didn't need to go into the game with a ruckman. That should have offended him. And he should have absolutely destroyed Melbourne. And an absolute piss-weak effort from Riley O'Brien, in my opinion.
Yeah, look, I was disappointed with him in the sense that with the ruck work, he never hit it to our players. 1/3 of his hit out went there, or less than that, or around about that. And as you say, only 5 marks for the game. He should have been the dominant player on the ground, just about, really.
Yep.
Luke Jackson did that last week. He stepped up from being a support role to the man on the ground, and unfortunately got a knee injury. But Riley O'Brien, I think what he's giving is all he's got to give. There's no more, I don't think.
Yeah, Paige reckoned I just hit a blighty on Pittman, and it was bloody pathetic. It really was. I mean, Riley gets pissed off when he gets dropped to the twos and has 37 touches and 1,000 marks or whatever. He should have been just as annoyed and seen just as much of an opportunity when Goodwin decides not to bother taking a ruckman. Like he should have imposed himself on that game. He didn't run hard enough. He wasn't strong enough in the aerial contests. He didn't do enough at ground level. He didn't put himself in a position to be an option anywhere near enough. He didn't make himself difficult to play against at all. At no stage did Riley O'Brien make Simon Goodwin scratch his head and go, shit, what are we going to do about O'Brien? At no stage did Goodwin have to worry about O'Brien for that whole match. It was an absolute get-out-of-jail-free card for them. It was shithouse.
That was all.
Yep. It was shithouse. No time for Riley. I'm done with him. Parnell still continuing to build around the edges, 10 and 5. Pardon me, 2 tackles, 226 metres gain. I don't know about you, Mac. I like a lot about what Patrick does.
Well, you've got to judge him on this. He's rolled with Steve standing ticket, and he got 1 goal for the game.
Yeah,
so,
and you've got to commend him for that.
Well done by Parnell.
Yeah, you got to commend him for that. And oh, pardon me, I'm starting to lose my voice here. Because he's been in reasonable form too. So continues to build Patrick. Brodie Smith, on the other hand,
he stunk it. He stunk it up, mate. He stunk it up.
Well, there's probably a good case for Brodie to be dropped, in my opinion. I think, he's had mixed form this year. He's had some really good games, and then since the last head knock that he got, he just seems to have gone downhill. Whether he's lost a bit of interest or a little bit of passion for the game this season, or a bit of desire or whatever, but he's not being proactive with his football at all. He's not running very hard. He's not providing many options on the outside. So he's just sitting behind the ball and being reactive. And his disposal was absolutely shocking. So,
I was going to raise that for a player of his calibre who's been playing so long. His disposal, he's actually one of the creators of many of those bombs to the half forward line.
Yeah. Well, but that's been Brodie for the majority of his career. Let's be honest.
Yeah, well, he certainly was. I agree with you, but I thought he was at his peak doing it on the weekend.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I totally disliked his game.
Yeah. Harry Schoenberg had an interesting game. 14 disposals, but only 3 kicks, 5 tackles. I felt like it. Harry looked like he was playing with a distinct lack of confidence, but he just seemed to grow into the game a little bit. He had that little purple patch of clearances, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast. He had 6 for the game. Seemed to be playing a certain role, and I hope they persevere with him, because I just felt like there were glimpses of him starting to become a little bit more proactive again. And I wonder whether he's another one of these players who has they've overcoached a little bit, maybe, and maybe he just needs to be given a little bit of license to play for the rest of the year.
Well, you could well be right, because Nix has often come out and said that Harry's got to do this and Harry's got to do that. And so, Harry may well be going out there thinking, I have to do this, I have to do that, rather than just think, get ball. Yeah.
Yeah, Harry last year, when he was starting to play really well, was playing very instinctively and, without what seemed like without a specific role. He needs to be around the ball. I don't like him playing on the flanks and the wings. He needs to be around the ball. I do hope they persevere with him. He needs to, he's done his time in the twos. He's had some good games in the twos without shooting the lights out. But I hope they just persevere for the last few games of the season. Jack Haitley, we've spoken about him, needs to be inside or that's about it really. The only other role I could see for Jack Haitley is as a lead up high half forward, but we're pretty much covered there at the moment. Geordie Butts, I thought, did all right. Chase Jones, a lot of people banging on about Chase's game. I didn't think it was as horrendous as some. A couple of bad turnover mistakes.
And a couple of things. I thought a couple of his dashes looked good. Unfortunately, he let himself down with his disposal a couple of times very badly. But he wasn't horrible. I mean, he got 10 possessions when he came on, and he does provide speed and movement. And if he can actually get his kicking 100% right all the time, then he'd be a bit of a weapon.
I'll tell you what Jones does, I reckon, Mac. He tries to drill blokes. Don't you reckon?
Yes.
He's got to learn the art of putting the ball into the space and letting a bloke run onto it. Because as soon as you drill it, you've got to be very precise. If you've only got a couple of metres leeway if you're kicking it at that speed, whereas if you pop it into space, a bloke can run onto it. So if he just took a yard of pace off his passes, I think he might be, and it might actually take a little bit of pressure off him to have to be able to be so precise. I like a bit about what Jones brings across halfback. He's got to be more consistent, and he's got to take those turnovers out of his game. But I think at the moment, if having invested time with him down back, we've got to give him until the end of the season to really see if he can continue to build, or whether he might end up being, someone who is a first 22. I think it's too early to pull the pin on Chase this season. I think we need to give him until the end of the year.
That was a great call on his picking, though, Fiend. That's where he's going wrong. If he just because he got the ball okay and he did it at pace. All he had to do was just steady and just, as you say, put it out for them to run into, and it would have been valuable. I just hope if I'm listening to this cast, they might tell him to do that.
Yeah, I doubt it. Jimmy Rowe, I'm absolutely done with James Rowe, Mac. I don't want him ever playing for the Crows again.
You love him that much?
No.
He did have a stinker. I don't know. Last week I thought he played very well.
I don't care.
Well, he doesn't play really where he's named, and I don't know whether that's his fault or whether he's told to play there.
I don't care. The thing with Rowe is he got picked to be a small forward, right? And we've seen glimpses of his footy IQ up the ground and all the rest of it, but he's not a small forward's arsehole. And the thing that I don't like about him is he is soft, and he does not do any defensive work whatsoever, and he will never be fit enough to do defensive work. He is soft, physically and mentally, and I don't want him anywhere near a Crows Guernsey.
Who would you put in his place?
I don't care.
No, I in the chat they mentioned Cook and Newchurch. I still think Cook is a great talent that we should be developing more. And if he knew that we really believed in him, but I think he's already showed us he's got lots of ability. I'd like to see him develop more. Newchurch, I also think he should be. We've got nothing to lose now, Pete. I mean, we're not there. It doesn't really matter
100%.
where we finish on the ladder. In fact, we're at the stage now, the lower the better. So I'd like to see Newchurch come in.
Yep. I don't mind who, but James Rowe is not the answer for the Adelaide Crows, and it's a good story and all the rest of it, and well done to him for being a mature age pickup and all the rest of it. He's just a very good SANFL player. He is not tough enough and does not do... Because the reason why I say it, Macca, is because all through the last, 15 years or so that we've been watching the Crows in the last 15 years, we've consistently been let down by players in big moments, right? And I put Brodie Smith in this category. I put players like Richie Douglas in this category, Nathan Van Berlo in this category. These blokes that let us down in big moments. And to me, James Rowe is one of those players. You cannot trust him. He will go missing in key moments.
I understand exactly where you're coming from, Pete.
Yeah. Anyway, Riley Thilthorpe, just a young kid making his way in the game. We've already talked about him. He'll be a ruckman down the track. Tex looked good early, and then they changed their configuration down back and tightened up a bit on Tex. Then he got a nice big corky and started going up for the ball one-handed again. My thing about Tex is if he's not 100% right next week, please don't play him. Perfect opportunity
during the game. I thought he was going very well up until that particular point, and then he really dropped out of the game after that. Because when you do get a corky, having had a corky, you can't run. You just can't run.
No, that's it. If it doesn't come up, he needs to have a rest. Perfect opportunity to bring Lockie Gallant in and have a Fogarty Gallant Thilthorpe forward line next week. But nothing much negative to say about Tex. Early in the game when the game was really hot, he was all in amongst it, and certainly a key contributor. So well done for him there. Nick Murray tries his guts out. Didn't kill any one of our players this week, so I guess that's a tick. Lockie Murphy, I don't want to spend any more time on him. I'll just put him in the James Rowe category. Darcy Fogarty, still not big numbers. He's had us excited over the last month. I felt like he could have done more at times, Macca, and this is again the worry that I have about Fog, is that...
look, in fairness to Frog, the way the ball was coming, it didn't give me
no. Yeah. Jeez, you're jumping all over me tonight, Mac. Just relax and let me finish my damn sentence.
Apologies, mate. Sorry.
I know you missed a week and you got all this pent up stuff. No, look, I agree with you. I don't think he had a huge amount of opportunities. My fear with Darcy is he had that little purple patch. I don't want him to rest on his laurels. He needs to continue to build, because the game against North Melbourne, he needs to be able to replicate that against the really good sides. You know what I mean? Otherwise, he's just going to be a flat track bully, and we can't have that. If he's going to pick up the reins from Tex, then he needs to be able to perform in all circumstances. So Darcy cannot be content. He needs to continue to build and grow and develop and get himself involved. And I just worried that he maybe sat back a little bit again last week. Anyway, Josh Rochelle.
Can I just make one comment there?
Sure.
I don't think whoever would have been playing there would have done well with the way that ball was coming in, though. They set up with Lever firstly, and then what's his name, May behind that, and and the intercept marks tell the story there that it's very, very hard.
100%, 100%.
And also, they put in the chat they asked, did Fogg get a week? No, he didn't. He got a fine, $2,000.
Yeah, did Lever get a week?
No, he should have.
Got a week for staging.
Hang on. Somebody says that he did get a week for staging. I hope he did.
No, I think that was just a joke.
Steve, yeah, be excited, mate.
Oh, mate.
It was massive. It was massively staged.
Did someone see if Pickett got a fine for his late gut punch on Geordie? Was it Geordie? Charge of striking. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
$2,000. There you go. $2,000 sanction. That's about right. I'm glad they did that because it was well after the play and it was a thinly disguised gut punch. So I'm glad Pickett got fined as well. Joshua Shelley, we've already talked about him. Do you keep him in, Matt?
Sorry?
Joshua Shelley, do you keep him in?
No, I don't. No, you can't say to a lad that he can stay in there with a game like that, and that followed up a poor game the week before and the week before. Any opportunity he's had, his stats just been so low. You can't play him. I keep saying leave Shelley, and I'm saying no. If I'm in the twos watching that and seeing this bloke being kept in there on 4 possessions and 5 possessions, 6 possessions, well, no, I wouldn't be very happy, and that's not going to build team spirit if you're going to play him when he's playing poorly and you're playing well in the twos. No, can't do it.
I'm of a slightly different mind. I 100% agree where you're coming from. I would be inclined to drop Murphy and Rowe and bring in Cook and Tariq and give Rochelle a bit more licence around the forward line.
And see how he goes. Look, if the situation is that he's playing a role and it's not working, then fair enough. But look, I really don't care who they bring up and put into the A-grade side up forward at the moment or at various other spots. We should be experimenting with certain players because we've got so many players on our list who haven't been given an opportunity all year, or perhaps never given an opportunity. And Worrell's a very classic case of that, and we didn't even bring him in when he was in form. And then there's a cut-off coming up pretty quickly, and it's going to be very important for these players' careers.
Yeah, Rabbit's saying Cook isn't a forward. No, he's not, but I reckon he could play a high forward, sort of almost wing. Rabbit.
He has played high half forward.
Yeah. And in his under-18 year, Cook actually, I think he was averaging a goal a game just about in his under-18 season. So it's not as if forward is foreign to him. But I'd play him fairly high and have Rochelle and Tariq, raising hell sort of, 30 metres out. And Lockie Scholl didn't get a run, so I can't comment on that. That's about it for there. I guess what we need to do out of all that lot, Macca, is go to our votes. And no, yes, I haven't updated the table yet because I barely got out of bed all week, so I'll do it.
I'll go first then.
Go on.
I like Dawson first. I gave him 5. He played so many different positions and he just does what the coach tells him to do. And I thought he's great. He could have even been better if he wasn't wasted for that little period up full forward. I gave 4 points to Laird. Started very slowly, but I thought he was very dominant in the second half. Unlike you, I wasn't that down on Keys. I put him in at 3rd position because he worked very, very hard. He did kick 2 goals. And at least he does set an example in terms of his work ethic. I gave 2 points to Saligo. I thought his 20 disposals, they were very hard earned, most of them. And I reckon if you put a tracker on him to see how far he run, he would probably run as far as any other Crows player did. And for a first-year boy, he's been getting better and better each week. I think he's been outstanding. And I think he's going to, in the long run, he's going to be that good guard midfielder that we really need. I really, really like Saligo. And Berry, I would have had a little bit higher for his disposal. I thought he had 17 disposals, 13 tackles, and look, he is a success. Now all they have to do is get him to refine his kicking, and he's going to be a very good player for us. So it's Dawson for 5, Laird for 4, Keys for 3, Saligo for 2, and Berry for 1. I gave nothing to Rob because I thought he was going up only playing against 2 tall witches' hats.
If you'd have given something to Riley O'Brien, I would have banished you for the rest of the season, Macca. That would have been Nicky levels of ridiculous.
Yes, I agree.
I gave Geordie 5 as well. Clear, best on ground. I actually gave Sambury 4 because I just felt like his work inside the contest for 4 quarters against the most physically developed and physically demanding midfielder in the competition was second to none. He did not stop all game, and yes, he burnt the ball a bit by hand, but his primary focus was to get down and dirty at the coalface, and he did that exceptionally well for a second-year player. Just exceptional, in my opinion. Laird, for his second half, really, I wasn't overly convinced in the first half, but he did get better in the second half. Saligo, I agree with you, Macca. Everything that is said about Saligo is true. And who did I give 1 vote to? Shit. I did have someone here ready to give 1 vote to. Mitch Hinge. I gave Mitch Hinge.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
Mitch Hinge 1 vote because I just thought he was more than serviceable across half-back, and it evened out pretty quickly after those first 4, in my opinion. I did like Harry's game, but he didn't do enough to get a vote. But it was nice to see Harry back in and getting some proactive touches. All right. Well, Mac, my voice is about to give out. We've gone 2 hours, so I reckon we might call it a night right there. Look, thanks to everyone who's joined us on Discord and also on YouTube. I think it was only on J&M on YouTube chatting tonight, but thanks for everyone who's listening in. Don't forget, give us a like and subscribe on YouTube if you're listening in during the week and you like what you hear. Also, if you're listening in on iTunes and feel so inclined, please drop us a review. It always helps our ranking on the iTunes tables as well. We will be back next week and the following week, and then I'll be off for 2 weeks, so we'll have to think about what we're going to do there, Mac. But I might have to do an overseas edition of the weekend wrap while I'm away. That'll be interesting.
It will be interesting.
But in the meantime, we will be back next week. You reckon we'll get up over the Hawks next week?
I'll say no.
I reckon we might sneak over the line. I don't reckon we're playing too badly right now. We'll see. But in the meantime, everyone stay safe, stay happy. Macca, great to have you on board again. We'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. And to everyone else, we'll see you next week.
Yep, night all.